Now we will discuss adverb clauses of place. As we have the adverbs of places, we have the clauses of place. So adverb clauses of place are introduced by the conjunctions like where and wherever. Sometimes we use everywhere, somewhere, like that also. Wherever you go, you will find Coca-Cola. Where there is a will, there is a way. A famous proverb you might have heard. That is the place where I was born. And this is the house where I live in. So can you notice the thing which I already pointed in the module? See, whenever you are putting this subordinate clause at the first position, right? Not at the final position. So when you are putting this at a first position, you are putting a comma here, right? Is a punctuation mark which separates the subordinate clause with the main clause. But whenever you are putting this as a final position, you are not setting off your subordinate clause to a main clause with the comma. Remember, this is very important point while you write it down these clauses. Now we are moving on with clauses of cause. So what are these? So clauses of cause are used to show why something happens, and these clauses begin with conjunctions like because, since and as. So let's take an example. I listen to classical music because it sounds beautiful, and since I liked the classical music, I chose to dance on classical song, and as she liked classical music, I gave mine all to her, mine CDs, something like that. So why do we use because, why do we use since and as, and where to use this because, since and as they're answering the question of why something happens. So you need to be wise while using this since, because and as. So let's understand with these examples only. Because is used to give information which isn't already known to listener or reader. Suppose in our sentence, I listen to classical music because it sounds beautiful, and suppose in this situation you and I are two roommates. You have to take you as my roommate, and you asked me a question, and we are very new roommates, we don't know each other very much. So hey, why do you listen to classical music? So in reply I said the first sentence, and I replied that way because I know that you don't know I like classical music. We don't have any shared knowledge on this that I like classical music, so I used because here. And now it's been a month we are living together, and now you asked me why did you choose to dance on classical song? Now we have a shared knowledge that I like classical music, and I use since to give you the reason of my choice. So when we have a shared knowledge of something, I know that my listener knows what I'm speaking, she knows or he knows about what I like or what I don't like. I used since, right, to reply why I chose. And so as since and as have the same meaning. So we use since and as are used when reason is already known to listeners. So as she liked classical music, I gave mine all to her. Means I gave mine all CDs or my books or my pictures, something like that, right? Let's move on to the another clauses of effect. So in this, as we have the reason why we did that, now we have clauses of effect to tell us about what is the consequence, what you did. For example, they often begin with so that and such that. And we usually put an adjective between so and that, and we can put an adjective and a noun or a noun phrase between such and that. For example, I was so tired that I couldn't stay awake. So I was so tired that it is a dependent clause. I couldn't stay awake. So tired here is an adjective between so that. What was the effect, right? I was so tired that I couldn't stay awake. The meal was so delicious that made it again the next day, right? Uma is such a good runner. So a good runner, look at this. A good runner is a part of, a good runner is a noun phrase, and good is a part of a noun phrase, right? That nobody can catch her. Now moving on with clauses of comparison. Now clauses of comparisons are used to compare two things or idea, and they often begin with then. As you were doing the comparisons with your additives and adverbs, so same we have the clauses of comparisons and how we use it. Let's see through this example. The house was bigger than we had imagined, right? What was bigger than, right? We had imagined is in another clause, and the house was bigger than is a subordinate clause, right? So the house was bigger than we had imagined. So we are using then to compare the we had imagined, the clause, the main clause. He always spent more money than Ansh did, right? So who spent more money? With whom? More money than Ansh spent. We can use a that clause after a superlative. So if you are comparing two things, right? So you are using then. But what to use for a superlative degree of additive? It was the biggest fire, right? Now that is not a part of a relative clause, which is a relative pronoun, right? That is also a pronoun. This, that, these, those. But here that is not working as a part of relative pronoun beginning a relative clause. Here it is working as subordinating conjunctions and beginning a subordinate clause of comparison. So it was the biggest fire that anyone had ever seen. You may do as you please. So this is an example of as. It all ended as we expected. We are comparing things. How it ended as we expected. Now children, we are moving on with the clauses of condition, and they are also called as conditional clauses. So conditional clauses are a group of adverb clauses that do not fit into time, place, reason and manner classification. Why do they do not follow? Because they do not answer any adverb question, like a question of how, question of time, of when, or your place, like where. They do not answer any question, and they are commonly use subordinate conjunctions for conditional clauses are so many. For example, as long as, assuming that, in case, in the event that, on the condition that, provided that, so long as, if, unless. There are many. So look at them here. We will order out as long as it is okay with everybody. We are going to play tonight, assuming that we can get tickets. We'll take our jackets in case it rains. The game will be rescheduled for Saturday in the event that the field is unavailable. So this is the way how we use them, and it is as possible with all other adverb clauses. We can shift the conditional clauses also to the beginning of the sentence, means we can shift them to the first position also. So what do you need to remember here is when the conditional adverb clause follows the main clause, right? We are not using any comma here. Can you see that? We are not using any comma. As same I told you earlier, if they are at the first position, we need to use comma to set them off with the main clause. So as long as it is okay with everybody, we will order out. So here we are separating our subordinate clause, which is beginning with as long as, the conditional clause. We are going to set this information of subordinate clause with the main clause with the use of comma. Do remember this thing. Now unless is a bit different, because it is a condition of it represents a negative condition. For example, if not. So unless you eat your spinach, you can't have dessert. So if you don't eat means is equal to if you don't eat your spinach, you can't have dessert. So now we are going to begin with our clauses of concession or contrast. So, concession clauses are another group of adverb clauses that, like conditional clauses, do not fit into the time, place, reason, and manner classification. And why do so? They do not fit because they also don't answer any adverb question. Also, in contrast to time, place, reason, and manner adverbs, there are no concession word level actually. So, we do not have concessional clauses also. And there are only a few subordinate conjunctions to represent that: although, even though, and your even if, while, and whereas. So let's look at the example. We use although, though, and even though to join the main clause to a subordinate clause that contains a surprise or unexpected. So this subordinate clause from where you are going to begin which you are going to begin with your subordinate conjunction although, though, and even though is going to represent a surprise or unexpected result, right? You remember your coordinating conjunction, but which are used for two purposes, like for denial of expectations and pointing on the difference between two conditions. So the same way, if you don't use but, you can also use the clauses of concession like although, though, and even though. So here I'm going to present the example. I'm going hiking and camping this weekend, although I hate camping. Her friend never showed up, though she waited for almost an hour. We decided to just stay at home, even though I got ready to go. So here you notice that concession clause in their normal adverb position, right? At the end of the sentence are still set off from the rest of the sentence like this. There is a comma and you are setting off this with a comma, this subordinate clause. And earlier in any other clause, when they are at first position, right, then you are putting a comma to set off your main clause with the subordinate clause. But here you are setting off your subordinate clause to a main clause with the help of comma in cases of clauses of concession. So this use of the comma is unique among adverb clauses, and the convention for using a comma with although, even though, and though probably came about because these three subordinate conjunctions are used to introduce a clause that is contrary to expectations set up in the main clause. So using a comma with any other type of sentence final adverb clauses would be ungrammatical. However, in case of although, even though, and though, the comma is obligatory. So you remember what I'm saying? And in fact, leaving off this comma is one of the more prevalent punctuation errors in English. So as we would expect, we can easily shift concession clauses in front of the main clause. So here in both the cases, like whether you put the concession clause at the beginning of a sentence or towards the end of a sentence, you are going to use your comma both the time to set off these clauses to the main clause. Remember this is an obligatory thing, and if you are going to not use the comma, it is kind of a serious mistake, so don't commit that mistake. Moving on, even if. So even if is similar to even though, although, and though, and it is used in the same way, right? Whether you are putting on the first or second, but it means whether or not. So even if you run fast, so means whether or not you run fast, you still be late for the school. I'll be happy even if I'm not chosen. So the condition means you are presenting a contrary situation. Even if they are not going to choose me, I'll still be happy. Let's head on to subordinating conjunctions while and whereas, which represent or indicate the direct opposition. They do not indicate any unexpected results, means they in the main clause there are no expectation set up here which you are going to deny. For example, while some people are tall, others are short. Some people are tall while others are short. Whereas some people are tall, others are short. Some people are tall, whereas others are short. So notice what is important here is the punctuation mark. So while and whereas subordinated clauses, wherever they appear, maybe they appear at first position or they appear at the second position. You need to set off them with the other clauses. So move on with the clauses of purpose. So adverb clauses of purpose are introduced by the subordinating conjunctions that, so that, in order that, and lest. So I turned the TV off so that my roommate could study. In the first sentence, the purpose of my turning off TV was to make it possible for my roommate to study. So I did that, and we do not use comma to mark the beginning of this subordinate clause. And let's look at another example. She wants to study in England so that she can perfect her English. So what was the purpose of her to study in English? In England, because she wanted to have a perfect English, and she wanted to speak very nicely, and she wanted to write very precisely. So that's why she wants to study in England. So there is a purpose. But in this third sentence, just carefully notice something. Shipra grounded her son, comma. So he didn't talk to her for weeks. Now, is it a purpose here or something else here? Because in this third sentence, Shipra didn't punish her son with the purpose of making it possible for him not to talk to her. So the result of her punishment was that he couldn't talk to her, right? So we do use a comma to mark the beginning of an independent clause. Here you can see he didn't talk to her for weeks, right? So whenever you are using so to mark any result, therefore that becomes a coordinating conjunction, where you join two independent clauses, right, to make a compound sentence. But here, so that in our second or first example, I turned the TV off. Now, so that my roommate could study. What is that? So that my roommate could study, right? So in that my roommate could study doesn't make any complete sense. It's not a complete thought. You are presenting a subordinate clause. Therefore, you are not using any comma there. Now let's move on to lest. Put on your warm clothes lest you should catch a chill. So lest means that not, and therefore it will be wrong to add another not in the following clause. Moreover, it should be noted that only modal auxiliary verb that can be used after lest is only should. You cannot use any other word like do not or should not or could not or may not. It is not right.